Bad tenants can quickly become a big problem. So, whether it's because they've fallen behind on rent, damage your property, or cause disturbances to the neighbors. And this can be quite frightening, often forming a mental barrier to growing your portfolio and achieving those financial results that you're looking for. And especially for newer investors and those that have inherited a property, become accidental landlords, or just starting to get into the journey. So in this episode 4 of the Profitable Rental podcast by Landlord Studio, we're going to explore the 6 building blocks of real estate profitability to help you maximize and grow your portfolio. I'm Logan Ransley, one of the co-founders of Landlord Studio, property management and accounting software designed for the small to medium-sized landlord and real estate investors. And so in this particular episode, we're going to explore that kind of landlord-tenant relationship, help identify the kind of actionable steps that you can take to minimize that risk of renting out your portfolio and keep your tenants happy, and most importantly, maximize the return on investment for your property. And to help us with this topic today, we have a very special guest, Kim. Kim is a real estate investor, author, landlord strategist, entrepreneur, co-owner of 2 companies, Babb Properties, B-A-B-B, and Legacy Real Consulting. Kim is passionate about working with small landlords to teach kind of landlording skills and implement better systems to manage their rental properties. Along with her husband and business partner, Kim has been self-managing rental properties for family members and herself for 38 years, I believe, with a 0% eviction rate. And that's kind of key for today's episode. That effectively makes her one of the perfect guests to discuss this tenant strategy today. Kim's goal and passion is to help small real estate investors and build generational wealth and monthly cash flow by honing their landlord skills and treating rentals like a business, which is also one of those key kind of points that we need to really dive into. Hello and welcome, Kim. How are you going today?
Thank you. And I'm doing phenomenally awesome today. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
No problem. And I always like to start with a bit of an icebreaker question. Love to know your favorite quote and what it means to you.
I have many of them, but one that comes to mind as you ask the question is, and I seen it recently, it's a quote by Muhammad Ali, who said that if your goals don't scare you, it's time to find new goals.
Love that. It's about, I guess pushing the boundaries and pushing your kind of potential as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we've all kind of heard the horror stories about bad tenants and equally about bad landlords. But so I kind of want to get your thoughts, starting off on the role of the landlord and the importance of having the kind of right business orientated mindset when it comes to actually managing your rental properties. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So first and foremost, I think it's essential to realize that having rental properties is a business that sometimes and many times is missed depending on how you arrive as a landlord. Like, you may inherit a property, you may be given the property, you may intentionally purchase a property, and is not always approached as a business. That's number one. And then number two, I heard a quote by a good friend of mine who's just a phenomenal multifamily real estate investor, which I say all the time, and that is, landlording is a skill set. It takes a skill set to be a landlord. And if you, number one, just stumble into it, number two, don't have this skill set, then it's really a recipe for a lot of missteps, frustration, stress, and lost revenue.
And that kind of leads into that whole eviction scared, I guess that whole...
I don't like that word. I don't like that word.
Eviction rate that everyone's so familiar with. So we mentioned in the introduction there, 0% eviction rate, 30 years of owning investment properties as a landlord. This obviously means you're doing a few things right. So I'd love to kind of get a bit of insight into that. What are the things that you started out doing wrong? What did that kind of lead to in terms of problems? And then How did you kind of decrease that over time and fix those problems over time? And then what's that secret to that 0%?
Absolutely. And so from a numerical perspective, it's this year is 39 years of a 0% eviction rate. My husband and I started out managing his mother's multifamily units in the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the USA 39 years ago. And some of the mistakes that we made, based on the wonderful opportunity that we had with his mom, and the deal was if you finish the property, which my husband was working on the property, if you finish the property, you can manage it, you can keep the rents. We were like, yes, right? Knew nothing about landlording and property management. So one of the first mistakes that we made was when we found a tenant, it was like Christmas in July. First, last, and 1 month security. We would spend the money. Like, it was Chris that so that was a bad business move. That was one of the missteps that we made early on because we had to scramble when that tenant gave notice, and we had to come up with the loss of the last month's rent, and then we had to come up with the security deposit. So fast forward 39 years, totally different business approach. It is a business, and it's not Christmas in July when a new tenant moves in.
I guess the second part kind of looks into some of the strategies, just to kind of talk a little bit about tenant turnover. So we've kind of done a few studies into Smart Move by TransUnion, and vacancies can cost upwards of $2,000 a month before you consider lost rent, and evictions can cost over $10,000. So I guess that second part of that question is really just digging into how are you reducing the impact of tenant turnover, and what are some of those steps that the listeners could take in order to maximize that for themselves.
Sure. So what we learned early on in managing my mother-in-law's multifamilies, which are like triplexes and quads, was in apartments, tenants don't tend to stay as long as if it's a single family unit, right? So we were able to observe that difference in the housing stock. And so when we started investing, we just started buying single family properties, and we've stayed in that groove for the last 30 years. We only buy single family, and people tend to stay longer. They tend to stay longer. So it's less turnover. People tend to make it more of a home than they do apartments. So we've noticed that observation and that trend. We felt comfortable in the single family, so that's where we've stayed. In reference to turnover, I believe from a customer service perspective, if you screen right, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a minute because that's at the very, very top of our priority list, is finding the right partner. And I use, and people who've heard me and listened to me, I equate managing rental properties with a marriage. Right. And we have 3 units turning over at the end of this month. We're doing the dating game right now. We are looking for a partner to marry, to sign a prenup with, to give them the key, which is the putting the ring on the finger. Okay. And so the screening aspect of the exercise is critical. When you meet someone, you need to see if you have chemistry with them. So that's the dating game, right? And we use all sorts of tools to determine if we have chemistry, if their morals and their ethics and their character meets the standard of our company that we can live with. And if it does, then great. We continue on the dating process, and we check out the background, etc. And if it feels really good, we propose to them, they accept, and we create a lease, which is the prenup. We give them the ring, which is the key, and we enter into a great relationship. Life happens. People stay for whatever term that they would like to. Some get very comfortable and they stay. So one of the keys in minimizing turnover is providing a quality product, right, for a competitive rate. And as long as we feel both parties enter into that relationship being in agreement that this is a great product, it's a competitive rate, and I agree to uphold my end of the prenup, which is the lease, and you agree to uphold yours, then we can walk down the aisle happily ever after and stay married as long as the relationship is healthy. Unfortunately, turnover could happen with that E word that we've never experienced. We don't want to experience, which is eviction, which I correlate to a divorce, right? And anyone who's been divorced, they know it's costly, it's emotional, it's stressful. And so we do as much as we can upfront in building that relationship and building a foundation to avoid the eviction on the back end. We've never experienced it. And so my most recent career in state government of 23 years ended about 2.5 years ago. I fired my 9 to 5 and am doing real estate full time. And that's when we started Legacy Real Estate Consulting, which is the education arm of our business to help, self-managing landlords and property owners to do it better so they can avoid the evictions, so they can have a greater and more consistent cash flow and have better relationships with their tenants.
Amazing. And just to kind of go into the crux of, I guess, when you're actually analyzing some of those tenants, what are some of the red flags? Like, I'm sure you've turned down tenants during this whole process. What are some of the red flags that kind of spring out to you among your kind of journey and experience that you would consider just an absolute no-go?
So what we're looking for is honesty, right? Honesty, communication, consideration, responsiveness. These are all the components that we're going to, bring into the relationship. So having said that, for example, one red flag was when, we had a unit available, it's down on the market, individuals are calling who are interested. And just to cut myself off, part of my past corporate history was as an underwriter, underwriting redevelopment deals in urban cities all across the state of New Jersey. So I understand underwriting. It's all about risk management. Okay. And so managing real estate and rental properties is all about risk management. So we have an applicant who's interested in our unit, and we require to see all your documentation. We're going to do criminal background. We're going to check with your landlord, and we need to identify and follow the money. Where is your resources coming from? So a red flag that we ran into years ago was they didn't want to disclose their income. They had a trust fund. That's great. I'm happy for you. I need to see the documentation. They refused to share that. So that's a red flag. That's not someone who is conducive to the relationship. You're not going to be transparent. You're not going to be honest. So that's a deal breaker.
And those tenant screening reports, how much faith do you kind of put into them? How accurate do you find them? And do you find them useful to help you with that decision-making process?
We really have like 8 steps to screening a rental applicant. And so when we talk about the background reports, it may be like 50% because we are combing a number of different areas, liens and judgments, bankruptcy, evictions, criminal background, all of the public record information. And then we're compiling that with, for example, a conversation like you and I are having, mandatory. Pre-COVID, we would actually meet with the finalists face to face, have a conversation with them. Of course, COVID motivated landlords to pivot and explore technology. So, of course, we incorporated Zoom. And I just had an interview with a couple that we accepted last week on Zoom. I have a landlord checklist bundle for various aspects of the screening process. One of the checklists is the Zoom meeting checklist, and it has a list of questions, open-end questions that I'm going to ask the participants. Just like you can see my body language, you can hear the tonality of my voice, you can see the expressions. I want to read them. I'm going to ask the open-end questions, and I'm going to be quiet. And I have a good friend who's a judge here in New Jersey, and she made a statement that was profound that I use a lot, which is she sits on the bench and she judges people every day based on the information and the data and the situation in front of her. I believe as landlords, as self-managing landlords, we have to create systems and processes that are consistent, right, across the board with whoever expresses an interest in renting our unit. And one of them is the conversation. I need to be able to judge your character. I believe, a solid relationship is so much about character, values, commitment, communication. So my husband and I have been friends for 41 years, and this month we'll be married for 39. And I ran into a couple recently at a real estate networking event last week, and they were like, tell us, what's the secret? What's the secret? And I guess it's okay to say, like, every day, I ask for love, lust, trust, patience, and communication. And I believe similar values have to be had when you're engaging with a stranger who's your tenant, right? And you have to measure their character and their values to see if there is a match. And so on those Zoom conversations, I'm looking for that. I'm compiling it with the data, right? Which is what it is. And then I'm marrying it with how we connect, how you respond, and your honesty, because I'm cross referencing your application to the conversation that I have with your employer. I'm cross referencing the information that you put on your application in reference to your landlord. So I'm really measuring your honesty, your character, and your ability to pay.
So if we kind of crystallize that kind of 8-step process down into, this is step one, this is step two, this is step three for, the viewers in less than 30 seconds, how does that look? It obviously goes with listing the property first. How does that kind of look?
Sure. So you're listing the property. We use a showing agent. In the last 5 or 6 years, we use a showing agent. So we give them the criteria, they market it, they use our application, they use our standards, to create a short list of applicants. They turn that short list or, applicant over to us, and then we take the baton and go from there, because we've got to, implore our process. And then we start the background check, and we call the employer, we talk to the landlord, we do the Zoom meeting, and we compare all the data, we spread it out on the table, and we analyze. So it's so much about strategy and measuring and assessing and making a decision based on data and not on emotion.
I'd love to check out your checklists. I don't know if you have any of those copies online that you give away to listeners or viewers, but be a great resource for landlords listening today.
I do. They're on my website. We can
Amazing.
talk about that later. Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of jump into a bit more about while the tenant is in the property and how the communication looks. How does the relationship look? Would love to hear a little bit more about, how often are you communicating with the tenant? How do you kind of keep a really good relationship with that tenant going forward to make sure that they are, staying top notch in your property?
Sure. I believe, Logan, it's all about setting standards and setting expectations. And back to that communication again, right? Our company, it operates on like a 2-lane highway. My husband handles all of the construction, the contractors, because our space is acquisition, gut, rehab, rent, and hold, right? So we've done a number of projects over these 3.5 decades. He handles all of that. He's the first line of defense for any kind of maintenance, repairs, troubleshooting. I handle all of the marketing, onboarding of tenants, communication, management of our client base, right? So I'm painting that picture just to, create the context of when I'm interacting with that applicant, when we agree to enter into a relationship, a loving relationship, a healthy relationship, I'm setting standards. I'm communicating and I'm setting standards at the onset of the relationship. So they understand what our company standards are in reference to communication, right? And I was just given, I guess, the draft of an article that I'll be featured in JP Morgan Chase. They do all kind of articles, and I talked about communication and how I determine, like, based on the relationship management, what's the ideal type of communication that this tenant prefers? Do they prefer texting? Is it a phone call? Is it an email? So it's so much about psychology. And part of my training and coaching, I I peel back the psychology of the landlord, right? Who are you as an individual? Because who you are is going to spill into how you operate your company. And I also peel back the psychology of the tenant, right? What's their motivation? What's past history is an indication of future behavior. So when we talk about, communication, I need to set a standard of operation up front that everybody is in agreement with. For example, here's our cell number. If you have any issues, like, we are very hands-on. The applicants that we just accepted, one of the two, I attempted to do the landlord background check, never got a call back from the landlord. So, and the tenant was scrambling trying to get me connected to their landlord. So, when we talk about setting a standard of communication in that situation, that's not a standard of operation for our company because we're very responsive. There is no question that a tenant will have a problem reaching us. So, again, I'm setting that standard up front, and I'm setting the standard as to the fact that we're not stalkers, but I will be in here doing a maintenance walkthrough in the beginning of a relationship quarterly, at the least twice a year. Okay. I'm walking through is not a surprise because I'm saying it to you up front. These are our assets. Welcome to our tenant community. And I describe it and create this environment like Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. What was the special thing with Willy Wonka? It was the golden ticket. Everybody wanted the golden ticket. Well, to get into our tenant community, you need to win the golden ticket. Okay? Because we are giving you the key to our asset that we have poured blood, sweat, and tears into, and it is a part of our wealth building strategy. So I have got to 120% trust that you're going to fulfill your role. And I've got to set the standard of my expectations of you. And that's how we build that communication and relationship with our tenants. And I just spoke at a national women's conference in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I laid out what I call the 10 commandments of landlording. And one of the 10 commandments is, in light of what I just mentioned, of relationship building with our tenants, winning the golden ticket. One of the 10 commandments is, while we're friendly, I'm not your friend. This is strictly business. I'm not saying that we're not human, but this is strictly business. And so we build expectations and standards up front. And if the relationship, which our relationships have gone great, then it is mutually beneficial, and it stays at that level of professionalism.
I love the Ten Commandments, and would love to see the list of that if you've got that online. Just to kind of divert a little bit into paying on time, rent on time, etc. So one of the interesting things we've found at Landlord Studio over the last few years is that real estate investors who use our software to collect rent online statistically have more on time and regular payments and lower vacancy rates. So I'd love to get your view on electronic payments online, automatic payments versus the kind of traditional check and cash, etc.
Well, definitely not cash. And definitely not knocking on the door collecting rent. Do we do with technology in 2023, coupled with COVID? Like, COVID really challenged, I believe, small landlords and how we conduct business. And we were using ACH pulls prior to COVID. And I think too, it has to do with your type of clientele. The millennials, the younger folks, like, they're more into apps and conveniences, opposed to putting a stamp on an envelope and dropping it in a mailbox, right? And so we enjoy that modernization. And I would say 95% of our rent collection is through ACH. So again, when we are engaging with that new tenant, like I just did with this couple, we offer options to pay. And we make it very convenient for them to say, listen, we can provide an ACH. Is not necessarily bill pay, where they initiate the payment to us. We set up the ACH and we pull from their account every month. So I love the emails that you've been paid that come, the first of the month. That's automation for me, and that's worked great for us. We do have, just a few that still do the old school snail mail, and I'll make that post office box run any time of the day at the first of the month. So that's no problem. But the majority of our tenants do pay with ACH.
And just to kind of wrap up on one of the final questions, really just talking about that modernization, particularly around COVID, like you were mentioning, how important do you think it is for landlords, real estate investors, to have the right tools and systems in place, but not just for collecting rent, but for tracking maintenance requests and tracking communications and storing documents, and I guess the technology that's available out there. How important is it for a real estate investor in this day and age, and to scale, to implement some of those types of products into their business?
It's really essential. Efficiency and effectiveness and accuracy is critical, right? On a daily basis. Like, we're not 100% tech, but we have specific processes and techniques in place, like ACH, like a property management software system that we use, where we can do P&L statements, we can do, property reports, for accountant at the end of the year at the fingertip, things like that. COVID, DocuSign, incorporating systems like that where we're able to, handle business efficiently, effectively using technology, and make it convenient for, incoming tenants is critical. It's critical. It's really critical. I am disheartened sometimes when I talk to small landlords who are not operating like a business, and they're not able to answer certain questions about their business that they should be able to answer, specifically around the numbers, net profit, cash flow, et cetera, because they're still writing things down on pieces of paper. They're still knocking on doors, collecting rent. And I'm saying, like, being a lifetime student and continuously learning new techniques and systems to run your business more efficiently is critical to whatever growth that you want to be at. I never get comfortable with comparing where we are as real estate investors to a friend of mine who owns 100 doors. Like, that's what you want to do. That's not where we want to be. But there still, I believe, is a benefit of having efficiencies and processes and consistency in whatever scale that you're at.
Amazing. And I guess just to wrap it up today, really wanted to thank you for coming onto the podcast. And where can the listeners and the audience find more about you, more about your resources, and how they can, I guess, learn a bit more from you?
Sure, absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, I just fired my 9 to 5. This September will be 3 years. And so I believe and have embraced another adage and quote that speaks to the fact that it goes like this, learn, earn, and return. I believe in life that we go through the learning process and that we earn based on what we've learned. And if we're fortunate and blessed, then we can return that into the community. So that's been my transition from a career to my calling, which is legacy real estate consulting. And so you can go to my website at www.lldocS30.com. That's www.lldocS30.com. And that stands for Landlord Docs 30, which is a document bundle system that we took to market a few years ago. You can follow me on Instagram as well at LLDOCS30. I'm on most platforms at LLDOCS30.
Amazing. So go check out that, and make sure that you check out those docs and all the resources that Kim has. So that's it for today's episode 4 of the Profitable Rental podcast by Landlord Studio. Absolute privilege having you on here, Kim, and no doubt we'll be able to take some of your wisdom, apply it to our own businesses, share this with our community. And if you did like this episode, give it a like, give it a share, subscribe to our channel as well, keep up to date with the podcast, and follow us on social media as well. Look for Landlord Studio on all platforms, where we'll share this podcast and other resources, tips, and tricks as well. Make sure you stay tuned for episode 5 of the Profitable Rental podcast. It's going to be a great one. But until then, have a great week, and we'll see you then. Cheers.